With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning and welcome once again to the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson and joining me is Lorrie Boyer. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So we want to go right out the gate this morning talking about an important topic for a lot of livestock industry people, and that is the screwworm. And that is just a name I'm going to be messing up all morning, so bear with me. But Laurie, you know a lot more about livestock than I do. So tell me a little bit about the screwworm and why it's a problem.
All right. Well, here's what I know. And actually, it's fairly new to me as well. I think it's probably fairly new to a lot of U.S. producers, especially the younger generations, because this has not been a problem in the United States. It has been eradicated several years ago. We've not even talked about this or worried about this. And I've been doing farm broadcasting for 28 years. So it's been at least that long since we've had to deal with screwworm. Now, here's what I do know. It has been found in Mexico, especially parts of Guatemala. And their government there is working really hard to make sure they are maintaining and monitoring it. They are working in tandem with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Reports have shown that there's been a lot of transparency and a lot of discussion and a lot of extra monitoring on cattle that are crossing into the United States. And screwworm, although it doesn't cause immediate death, it can lead to death through infection. So what happens is as fly larvae or maggots burrow into a flesh of the living animal, they cause very serious damage to the animal. They can infest livestock, and they can also infect pets, which is something I didn't realize. So as we know, we are the number one dairy industry. We're already dealing with bird flu and other things like that. But now we have to worry about this. So hopefully it will not come into the United States, and your cattle will show some discomfort. A lot of times they're going to be moving around or bunching up. They also are probably not going to be eating, may not be drinking. So just monitor those herds a little extra. And any open wounds that they have, especially if those wounds are festering or oozing, you could suspect that there might be the screwworm in there. They're really hard to see, but you can contact a veterinarian. I don't know, maybe maybe one of the looking glasses, magnifying glasses. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that works or not. I haven't read that, but I'm just guessing that maybe some of that kind of thing might help you be able to see this screwworm in there. But I doubt it because they're so small and they dig into the flesh of the animal. So I feel sorry for the cattle who are dealing with that, but I know that Mexico, they are trying to eradicate them and make sure that they don't have to deal with them over there as well. And the bigger pictures we've learned with any major disease or any major pest that comes into the United States, or even for those in Mexico, it is a disruption for world trade, for world marketing. You take a big hit. A lot of partners will not allow the animals that have infections come over the borders. And so we do not want this to cross into the United States, Sabrina.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions, and as I'm sure that a lot of people do, my first question is, how do we make sure that it doesn't come into the United States, especially with us being one of the states that borders Mexico? Is it a risk that we are going to see this being brought into the States? And how is it, how would that be transported? Would it be coming from cattle? Is it in meat? There's just a lot of questions around that. First off, I do want to reinforce, though, that our meat supply in the United States, for any consumers who may be listening, our meat supply remains safe. This is not a grocery store issue. This is a taking care of livestock issue.
I do not believe that it would come into any meat or frozen meat, as the maggots need a live cow,
Right.
a live animal, because it's also a pest, to be able to live in. One other thing to notice, and this will really tell you if it's a screwworm, I neglected to say this, is that it'll smell like decay. So the animal's skin will actually smell of decay. And I guess I have never smelt it personally, but I guess
Right.
it is pretty odorous. So that is one way to know. And here I just found this. So if you are able to detect them, if you're able to see them on a surface at all, or if you have your magnifying glass, These adult larvae or these adult screwworms have orange eyes, a metallic blue or green body, and 3 dark stripes along their backs. So if you see any bright colored insects, you might want to take extra precaution.
I think that the fact that it can also affect pets can make it, even worse. Again, talking about having this move from Mexico into the US, it could be brought here, in somebody's pet, which obviously there's not as many regulations on. You can take your dog across the border and back. Um, and
Yeah.
that can cause, that can bring this pest here into the United States. So it's really worth taking a lot of extra precautions as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I do not believe, like I said, that it causes immediate death. It's if you let it
Right.
go.
And
But
it's
it's
more
highly,
from like secondary infections, not
yes,
necessarily from the pest itself, too.
exactly. Exactly. Now, um, it is not contagious per se if one animal touches the other animal, but what does make it contagious, as we know, the insects can fly and
Right.
get into to a herd mate or such. So just kind of like mosquitoes that spread these viruses and diseases and encephalitis and things like that. It's the same type of thing.
Right. So again, some of the things to watch out for if you have, if you find wounds on your animals, you want to inspect and make sure that you're promptly treating any wounds, because that will, open wounds will attract the screwworms and can cause a screwworm or bring on a screwworm infestation. You want to use antiseptic and fly repellents to keep flies away from any vulnerable animals. Also, maybe use some type of a surveillance system to detect and manage reintroductions. Um, Also, I'm reading here. To be honest, I'm just Googled here, and I am reading that topical or injectable antiparasitic medications can also help by killing larvae and managing infestations as well. So that would be something to talk with your veterinarian about, and just to make sure that you can help, keep your herd safe.
Yeah. Okay. I knew there was some topical treatments. I wasn't sure beyond that what all they were using to treat these animals. I guess the bottom line here in this, I just haven't said this for sure, but the bottom line here is typically maggots feed on dead flesh. These particular maggots, this screwworm larvae, is feeding on live flesh.
Right. Which is a big difference and can cause just significant impacts.
And as we've seen with bird flu, there's a lot of fears of it crossing into species. And as a matter of fact, I think you and I talked about this when we talked about bird flu here a few days ago, that there has been a case, I believe in Oregon, where a pig has actually
Mhm.
gotten a variant of the bird flu. So comparing not exactly to this, as that's a disease, but these screwworms or these larvae could possibly get onto a human, I would think, especially if you're out handling your cattle. So that would be an extra preventative measure.
Yeah, absolutely. Something to really be prepared for and to prevent. Absolutely. All right, we are going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I am on the road today. We'll tell you where I'm at. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She is Lorrie Boyer, and we will be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. So, what kind of challenges could farmers face when transitioning from traditional nitrogen-based fertilizers to humate-based solutions?
That's the fun part about this is the humates and humic acids, while they are certified organic products, the interesting part is most of the users are conventional users. They continue to use their conventional practices and they are adding them to supplement and help retain that nutrient and make it last longer. So you're using them similar to how you would a urease inhibitor or other products. You're adding them to your current application without much change.
There was research that showed humates can decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. Can you tell me more about that research?
Yeah, so it does vary by soil type and texture. And so I think farmers should look at that research and say, okay, will I get 30%? And that's going to vary by soil type and texture. Qualify that with your soil type and make sure that it's relative to your operation.
And then beyond emission reductions, how do humates enhance soil vitality and structure, looking long term for the agricultural production?
farmers talk about soil organic matter, and that's where the conversation ends. We got low soil organic matter, and they really don't dive into what the components of soil organic matter are. Soil organic matter has two pools. You have an active pool and a passive pool, and the active pool being those components that are being actively degraded by soil microbes. And you also have the passive pool, which is the leftovers. Those the organic acids have been degraded by microbes and are stable and are no longer susceptible to degradation. In that pool, you find humic acids, fulvic acids, and humin. And that's the deposits that we mine. So these are ancient plant deposits that are fully degraded. Humates are contributing to your passive fraction of your soil organic matter, which does a few things for your soil. Improves soil texture, which impacts water conservation, nutrient retention, and in addition to it just loosening up the soil and aiding roots to penetrate the soil better, getting access to more air, oxygen, and water.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled liveearth.com. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. So I am in Sacramento today, and I am excited to be here because I get to be at the Almond Conference, and which is always a lot of fun. So I wish that you could be here with me, Laurie.
Me too.
There's a lot going on today. Today is the first day for the Almond Conference, and so there are a couple of continuing education sessions. There's one on what to do with your unplanted land, and another one on the economics of almond production, and both of those sound really interesting. Another session that I'm really interested in because, I love my pollinators. So there's a session on pollinator habitat and what you need to know about endangered species. And that will talk about some of the action that's coming from state and federal regulators that could change endangered species rules. And growers and PCAs will also learn how growers can have added pollinator habitats to get some legal protection for their farming operations. And I love that idea because that works out in so many ways. It's kind of one of those win-win situations where not only are we taking care of the pollinators, but this can also help protect your land from, some state regulations and federal regulations and things like that, because it's using your space as a pollinator habitat in addition to your farm. And so that can be a really interesting discussion.
Wow. Yeah, I'll look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah. Also, they're talking about driving global demand for almonds through nutrition research. Now, as we know, almonds obviously extremely nutritious, a lot of health benefits to almonds. And that is, the word of that is just being spread around the globe. And that helps with our almond industry by increasing consumer interest in almonds. There is, as you and I have mentioned many times on the show, there is such an interest in health right now and with people getting back to natural ingredients. And I think that has had an impact somewhat on the almond industry as far as consumers using almonds in, new and creative ways. I've done a couple of interviews recently where people, talking about some different ways that people are using almonds, like almond flour is becoming more popular. And you probably know because you follow a kind of a strict keto diet, or you have for quite a while. Is that something that you've ever used, switched out your flour?
For my eating plan, yes, I do switch out my flour for almost everything. I don't eat a lot of it, but I have switched out to almond flour, and I really like the consistency. It's not near as fine and just the consistency is a little bit more grainy, so I really like that. But also, I was going to mention in there, like my eating plan, my snacks are almonds. Are high protein, they're good energy source. Your body utilizes them right away, and they're good fats, which is good for our brain.
That's right. Yeah. I'm a big fan of almonds. I think, our listeners, everybody knows, I know everybody within the NAFB knows that I'm a big fan of almonds. I will carry them with me everywhere. So, and that just comes from being the California girl in the organization, I think.
Well, and to your point there, when you were talking about the increase in popularity, also what I've seen is the flavors. They're making
Hmm.
different flavored almonds now, but the portability. So a lot of the packaging is different so that you can take it on the go or sports or wherever you need to. They come in different little packages, different sizes, and you can just pop them in your purse or your bag, your lunchbox or cooler, and away you go.
Do you have a favorite flavor?
I I like the smoked flavored ones.
That's my husband's favorites. My favorite is the soy and wasabi. I love the wasabi almonds. All right. Well, we are going to get into the rest of our show. We do need to take a quick break, and then Lori will be right back, and I will be following up at the end of the show. So stay tuned. There's a lot more to come. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lorrie Boyer.
Today, I talked with Dr. David Maganã. He is a senior horticulture analyst with Rabobank. We are going to be talking about the most recent North American Ag Business Review. First off, Dr. Maganã, what is the North America Ag Business Review?
Well, every other month we publish what we call the North American Agribusiness Review, and we provide an overview, what to expect in terms of weather, and then we provide analysis for the next what is likely to happen in the next few months, all across the food value chain, all from farm inputs all the way to consumer foods, including analysis on dairy, grains and oilseeds, animal protein, things like that. And as I said, I'm in charge of providing updates for fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts for this report.
Well, let's break it down now. Let's first off talk about this report and what your findings are in the fruit sector.
Well, here it was like 3 weeks ago when I was working on this one. Basically, I started covering, like, in general, some comments on fruits, particularly starting with strawberries and blueberries. At the time, it was past the peak of the California season, and prices were not particularly strong for strawberries, given availability was higher during this summer compared to last year. Now we'll be transitioning soon to the Florida part of the season that was delayed due to the hurricanes that impacted the plantings and delayed some plantings, and they had to do some replantings. So we're expecting probably some supply gaps at the beginning of the Florida season, and then some opportunity for strawberry imports coming from Mexico during the winter. And then I follow, like, with some comments on the blueberry sector. Obviously, during this part of the year, October, November, we almost 100% of all the blueberries that are marketed in the U.S. come from Peru. And Peru started with a slow start of their season in August, September, given that last year they tried to extend their season and they were pruning late. But now we've seen, again, strong shipments coming from Peru. And more importantly, there's been a variety renewal going on over the past few years. So now we've seen a better quality, more consistent quality in blueberries coming from Peru, and that will continue to be the case in the next few years. So this is an exciting, fast growth market that will continue to grow in the next few years in terms of blueberry availability year-round in the U.S. market.
Okay. A question on maybe the strawberries first off there. You didn't mention weather. I would think that from what I've read, strawberry producers really dealt with heat over the summer. Did that have an impact on the review?
Yeah, during the summer, but mostly, prices increased in August, September. Prices to the grower were between $16, $18 per flat. And if we see the prices for last year about the same level, then by October, we saw an increased availability as weather improved, and then prices went more like on the $10 range for the grower.
Anything else besides strawberries and blueberries to highlight from that report?
We touch also on citrus, obviously starting a new lemon marketing year in California, and then I didn't quite include the the outlook for the 24-25 marketing year in this one, but prices for lemons were usually they have higher prices during the summer, that is the U.S. off-season, and mostly dominated by imports coming from South America. But now starting in October, November, prices usually come down when harvest is starting to ramp up in California. Now we are also starting the navel orange season in California, and with prices being better compared to the past few years. And also in this report, I touch on a little bit on avocados and on the avocado market. We're starting the part of the season where the U.S. relies heavily on shipments coming from Mexico, and that will be the case in the next few months from now until the spring, where California harvest start to ramp up. And they're expecting good crop in Mexico, given that weather improved in Mexico after 22 and 23, that they had a severe drought in central Mexico. So now we're likely to have good availability of avocados, and prices will be mostly affordable for growers. And then to wrap up the fruit sector, providing an update on fresh apple prices, that after a bumper crop in 23 that drove the prices to a multi-year lows, now we're starting to see prices to start rebounding, given that the 24 crop is going to be more like in line with the historical averages, but still quite a challenge in the fresh apple market, given high inventories. But exports, particularly going into to Mexico, have been improving, and that will be providing some price support for apples in the next few months.
I'm visiting here today with Dr. David Maganã. He is a senior horticulture analyst with Rabobank. I'm Lorrie Boyer. This is the Ag News Hour, and we'll be right back.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. So what kind of challenges could farmers face when transitioning from traditional nitrogen-based fertilizers to humate-based solutions?
That's the fun part about this, is the humates and humic acids, while they are certified organic products, the interesting part is most of the users are conventional users. They continue to use their conventional practices, and they are adding them to supplement and help retain that nutrient and make it last longer. So you're using them similar to how you would a urease inhibitor or other products. You're adding them to your current application without much change.
There was research that showed humates can decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. Can you tell me more about that research?
Yeah, so it does vary by soil type and texture. And so I think farmers should look at that research and say, okay, will I get 30%? And that's going to vary by soil type and texture. Qualify that with your soil type and make sure that it's relative to your operation.
And then beyond emission reductions, how do humates enhance soil vitality and structure, looking long-term for the agricultural production?
Farmers talk about soil organic matter, and that's where the conversation ends. We got low soil organic matter, and they really don't dive into what the components of soil organic matter are. The soil organic matter has two pools. You have an active pool and a passive pool, and the active pool being those components that are being actively degraded by soil microbes. And you also have the passive pool, which is the leftovers. Those the organic acids have been degraded by microbes and are stable and are no longer susceptible to degradation. In that pool, you find humic acids, fulvic acids, and humin. And that's the deposits that we mine. So these are ancient plant deposits that are fully degraded. Humates are contributing to your passive fraction of your soil organic matter, which does a few things for your soil. Improves soil texture, which impacts water conservation, nutrient retention, and in addition to it just loosening up the soil and aiding roots to penetrate the soil better, getting access to more air, oxygen, and water.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation here today with Dr. David Maganã. He is a senior horticulture analyst with Rabobank, and we are reviewing the most recent North American Agriculture Business Review. In the first part of the show before the break, we went over the fruit sector that is in the review. Now let's talk about the vegetable sector. What are your findings in this review?
For vegetables, we see like prices for leafy greens and things like that are highly volatile and depend on specific weather conditions. And now the season is should be ramping up in the desert. So the conditions of prices will be fluctuating according to weather events. But most less volatile is the potatoes. Potato prices. Production is expected to be down, but not at the level that they were in 2022 and before, where prices were exceptionally high given the disruptions on the supply side. Now, having said that, also like potato shipments, particularly exports going into Mexico, have been improving in the past couple of years now that Mexico has granted access to fresh potatoes from the U.S. to all the Mexican territory, and we're expecting that Mexico will become the largest destination for U.S. fresh potatoes, surpassing Canada.
All right, so you mentioned leafy greens, you've mentioned potatoes. What else is included in vegetables?
In vegetables, we provide an update on the general retail sales. But if you don't mind, I would like to move to tree nuts. That is where I have a little bit more information and what's going on. And actually, we've been having a very exciting season for walnuts and almonds, where prices have been at a multi-year highs after very challenging seasons over the past 2 or 3 seasons for almonds and walnuts, given the logistic bottlenecks in 2022 and severe drought and low prices and things like that. Now, going into the 24-25 marketing season, we've seen that prices for almonds are significantly improving, given that to start this marketing season, inventories were at a multi-year low. So that shows that shipments have been quite strong and driving inventories to the lowest in several years and prices to the highest in the past few years. So that's in terms of almonds. But most relevant price improvement that we've seen is on the walnut space. The walnut industry globally, they've had 2 or 3 consecutive seasons that have been very challenging with increasing international competition. As you know, the U.S. is the largest exporter of walnuts globally. But over the past decade, they've been facing increased competition from China that went from being a net importer of walnuts to become a net exporter. Also, exports coming out of Chile have been increasing substantially over the past decade. U.S. walnut industry has been facing more international competition, and at the same time, they were also facing headwinds from logistic bottlenecks in 22 and also a heat wave that impacted the quality. So that really impacted the prices in 2022 that were historically low. Last year in 23, the crop was of exceptional quality and prices started to rebound, but they had they have the challenge to market a record crop for 23-24 marketing season. And now leading into 24-25 marketing season, we started the season with practically very, very low inventories and a crop that was about 30% lower compared to the record last year. That combined with all the challenges that the global industry was facing, now the industry will be in the next few years in an improved supply-demand dynamics. On the one hand, acreage in California will be flat to declining in the next few years. Also, Chilean production is not going to be significantly growing, so we may be expecting kind of flat production out of Chile. And from China, similar situation. So now we will see in the next few years that kind of a controlled supply, and the industry is also doing a good job in promoting demand for walnuts. So in the next few years, we will see that improved supply-demand balance, and that will be reflected in better prices for growers. And we're already seeing that that should be profitable for those growers that got good yields. Because the challenge this season was very heterogeneous pollination. So in some areas, they didn't have good conditions during pollination, and then they had very low yields. But those growers that got a decent pollination and higher than average yields, they will be cash positive this season for the first time in a few years.
Once again, my guest in this segment is Dr. David Maganã. He is a senior horticulture analyst with Rabobank. We'll be back with Sabrina Halvorson right after
Welcome
this.
back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back. For this segment, we're going to talk about the citrus industry and how our citrus fruit is looking around California and also checking in on Florida. We have joining us Aaron Middlestat, who is the CEO of Fruit Guys. You know, let's start out by just tell our listeners a little bit about the Fruit Guys.
Sure. We are a family-run B Corp business. We deliver fresh produce and snacks to offices, schools, and homes all across the country. My brother actually started the business 26 years ago out here in San Francisco, and then we've expanded. We have 11 facilities across the country. I became CEO last year, and now we are women-owned and women-led.
All right. So we wanted to talk about citrus today, and we're looking at California and Florida and kind of comparing the two and seeing how both states are doing individually as well. But let's start with California, and tell me a little bit about California, citrus health for California.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're always monitoring before the season, during the season, how are things going with our growers? So I talked to some of our farmers a couple of weeks ago, and what we heard was the impact of temperature was really big this year. So we had the Central Valley and Southern California had a warm summer into fall, and it really impacted both the size, made some of the citrus a little smaller, but also at the beginning of the season, it impacted the color. So a lot of the citrus was a little more yellow or green because citrus needs cool nights to get that nice deep orange. So now as we get later in the later in the season, we're going to see more of that really orange color that we're used to. But early on, they were seeing a little more yellow and green color. Otherwise, we're hearing quality looks good, taste is there. And so they're expecting right now a pretty good season.
When we're talking about citrus for consumers in California, obviously, our citrus goes more for fresh produce. So that color is a significant aspect when people are at the grocery store choosing what they're going to buy and which particular orange or a lemon or whatever they're going to get. That color is part of their decision making, right?
It is. And we really try and educate our customers on, and sometimes it's hard, but don't be dissuaded from trying a piece of fruit just because the color looks different. At different times of the year, we see it in summer again for Valencia oranges when, it gets warm, we just see a little bit more yellow. And so we really just encourage our clients, hey, open it up, try it, smell it, and compare because sometimes the color can be misleading. Some farmers actually gas their oranges to get that deep color, but a lot of ours don't.
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, even though the color hadn't quite been there because we didn't, the temperatures hadn't been right for it, the flavor, the taste on the inside was still very good.
Yes, we're hearing sugars are developing well and that the taste is there. And it's always fun to try citrus at different times of the season. Early on, it might be a little tartar or maybe sweeten up, and as we go through different varieties. So again, we sort of say keep trying, keep trying different things.
So what about in terms of production volume? Do we have a good crop size this year?
Yeah, as we were looking into this, the USDA releases reports throughout the year on Florida citrus and citrus overall for the country. And it was interesting, Sabrina, we saw that for Florida, they were really predicting lower volume across the country, actually, not just for Florida prior to the hurricanes. So they already were predicting a 5% lower volume than last year nationwide. And so now they're still refining numbers after the hurricane, but we are expecting those numbers for Florida at least to drop. And it sounds like there wasn't a lot of tree damage, which is great, but there was a lot of fruit drop where, the fruit falls from the trees and it's immature, it can't be used. So they lose some volume there. So they're still looking at it and really seeing where volume is going to land, but the estimates are expected to further be lowered because of the hurricanes in Florida, which will lower the overall volume nationwide. Now we're not seeing higher demand yet for California product. Our farmers are saying, hey, they're not really seeing an impact of lower Florida demand, but we will just continue to watch that as the season goes on.
And that was something that I wanted to ask about the hurricane impact on Florida. It's good that we didn't have a lot of tree loss because that would take years to recover. The fruit drop that kind of affects one season as far as how much product we'll actually have. But losing those trees, that can be huge, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we saw in stronger, hurricanes in years past. Several years ago, Hurricane Ian did a lot of damage to trees. And you're right, it can take, 4 to 5 years for a new tree to fruit. So that really does have impact on the availability, years down the line. So luckily it looks like we're not seeing that this year.
We're talking with Erin Middlestat. She is the CEO of Fruit Guys. We're going to continue the conversation right after this break. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We're talking this morning with Erin Middlestat. She is the CEO of Fruit Guys, and we're talking about citrus around the state. And so what about pests? Of course, for the last several years, we've been dealing with Asian citrus psyllid affecting crops. It started, of course, here in the U.S., in the Florida, but now have been seeing it in California as well. Other pest issues, too. Are we having a lot of pest pressure this year?
It's a great question, Sabrina, and we're still, I haven't heard much of it yet, but in Florida, it does continue to be an issue. Greening is that bacterial infection that's really impacted trees. Although we have heard that there's been some improvements and they've got some good strategies to reduce the impact of greening on the crop. Out here in California, there are still some quarantine zones and because of insects, but right now we're not seeing too big of an impact on volume or quality.
And what about California's water issues? Are they affecting citrus out there?
I think water is always a hot topic here.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything from our growers right now about that being an immediate threat. I think it's more an overarching issue of, how we use water, where that water gets distributed. But we are going into our rainy season. And so this is one where, it's really going to depend, we might have a different conversation in January or February, depending on how much rain we get over the next couple weeks. Too much rain can be damaging, we know as well. But not enough will certainly impact not just citrus, but future crops too.
So what about, looking to the future? How does citrus farming look for California and then out in Florida?
I mean, I think it's still a commodity that's high in demand. We deliver primarily to offices, and the number one fruit is bananas. But people really want easy fruit, and so satsumas, mandarins, pixies, all of these other small citrus are still really popular. So I think even though we've seen lower production over the past 20 years in terms of how much citrus has grown, I still think we're seeing a pretty good demand. And we are hearing that, volume, even though it's lower, hopefully we shouldn't have too many shortages and people should be able to get what they want. But I think we have consumers that are still really interested in having unique, sweet, high quality items and things that are easy to eat and peel. So I see trends really towards these, again, smaller or easy to peel items like the pixies and satsumas and sumos and those types of things.
So, just as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything that you'd like for our listeners, the growers or even just the consumers too? Is there anything that you would like for them to know?
Yeah, I think whether it's citrus or any other commodities, for fruit guys, we really believe in farming, and that it's important to important to support our small local farms. And so if you have farmers listening, as a business, Fruit Guys is happy to support you. We do that by buying direct, but we also have a community fund that gives small grants to farms all across the country. And these are micro grants to help farms be more sustainable. It could be things like drip irrigation or bee pollination projects that we do. So I think, we just want to continue to support farming in the US and through make it more sustainable for small family farms to keep growing. And that's really important to us.
How can somebody get more information about your grants?
Thank you for asking. So we have something called the Fruit Guys Community Fund. It is our nonprofit. And there's a website, the fruitguyscommunityfund.com, and that really will list all of the information about our grants. They open up in January of 2025. So if there are any farms out there interested in applying, and again, it can be anything, you can grow any product. You can check out that page, and grant applications will open up in January.
That's amazing. I had no idea that you did the grants. I would love to hear, more about it once the grant application process is open. Can we check back in then?
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, we've been doing it since 2012, and last year I think we had close to 300 applicants. So it's a great way to get a small bit of support for the farm. So would love to talk more about that when it's appropriate.
Perfect. Then we will reconnect in January and let everybody know more about those grants.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sabrina.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time. That is our show for today. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson on behalf of Lorrie Boyer and myself. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.